Yes lads, what is going on? Harry here. Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the best under 23 talents for the under 23 category on Sorare, because the league is starting in less than 30 days and I'm buzzing for it. We're going to be going through by position, starting with goalkeepers, working our way up to forwards. And at the end of the video, I'm going to try and build the best lineup for the under 23 category using MLS cards. So starting off with goalkeepers then, lads. We've only got a couple of starters. We've got Roman Celentano, who plays for Cincinnati. We've got Patrick Schulte, who is at Columbus Crew. Chris Brady of Chicago Fire. And then Jonathan Sirois for Montreal. We've also got John Pulskamp, who has played games for Sporting Kansas City, but I don't foresee him becoming the #1 starter next season. And then alongside that, we've got Jacob Jackson, who played a couple of games for New England Revolution last season whilst Petrovic was out. But again, I'm not too sure if he's going to become the #1 this season. So you're looking at 4 starting goalkeepers, basically. Chris Brady is by far the youngest at 19 years old. A player that I own actually myself. I really do like him as a goalkeeper. Chicago are probably, out of that list of 4 starting under 23 keepers, he's probably on the worst side, right? If you have a look at, Chicago's run of 4, maybe in the last 20 games of that, last season, it's just a lot of losses, right? It's very hard for Chris Brady to get really good scores. You got a dark green 88 here, 69 in here, where they beat New York Red Bulls. He went on a good run here, to be fair, where Chicago Fire were winning quite a few games and not really conceding many goals. And at the end of the day, if your defense isn't that good, it doesn't really matter how good your goalkeeper is, right? You are just going to concede goals. And do I think Chicago Fire are going to get much better next season? I mean, marginally. I'm not going to say much better, but I do think, you could foresee, a similar sort of vein of dark green scores and green scores from Chris Brady. But like I said, he is the youngest on that list. So for me, he has the most potential. But as far as scores go, I don't think he will top, that top 4, out of Celentano, Brady, Sirois, and Schulte. Now, Celentano's probably the best bet as far as goalkeepers go. Plays on the strongest team in Cincinnati. Although they have lost a few players in Brandon Vasquez, it looks like Alvaro Barrial will be leaving as well. We've got Celentano, who comes in at £25 as a limited. He's just under £400 as a rare card. Now, under 23 until 25, so you've got him for the whole of this season and then half of next season if we're talking under 23 eligibility. And as you can see, I mean, his scores aren't like that much better. They just kind of are better. Like, they're not incredibly better. Like, towards the end of the season, he went on a really good run. Cincinnati went on a great run. Before that, there was quite a few error-led to goals, penalties given away. He went through a bit of a tough spell here. He was on the bench for a few games. It wasn't all plain sailing for him. But yeah, the MLS is weird. Like, you won't find that many clean sheets, realistically, apart from some of the really good teams, i.e. Cincinnati, LAFC, maybe into Miami next season. They go on these patches of sort of good games and then good chances of clean sheets. But for the most part, there's just a lot of goals in the league. And goalkeepers, defenses, they just concede goals. So, you can't go into every game thinking, yeah, my goalkeeper's going to get a clean sheet, because it's probably not going to happen. As you can see, they started off the season incredibly well. Loads of clean sheets for Cincy. Went through a bit of a tough spell here. Own goal against St. Louis FC in a 5-1 loss. Went on another good little spell. Chunk of games here. Then went on a bit of a terrible spell, really, up until the end of the season, where it got a little bit better for him, but not. I mean, it got good. He is probably the best sort of goalkeeper, alongside Patrick Schulte for me. Columbus Crew were really, really good last season. His scores, again, were pretty good. You can see some really nice AA scores from him. So, as a goalkeeper, you get the majority of your score from keeping a clean sheet. But there is still all-around scores to be had as well. And as you can see, Patrick Schulte, 19 AA, 18 AA, is capable of decent AA scores. 10 AA, which is, isn't bad. 17 AA here. He somehow got an assist against Toronto. A few penalties given, a few error-led to goals. But you're going to get that. It's the MLS. It's a lot of fun. You aren't always going to get clean sheets every game. So, it's an interesting landscape. I wouldn't say any of them are like that incredible if we're talking like SO5, Sorare scores. But, if I had to pick one, it probably would be Celentano. Just having a little look at Sirois as well. Another decent goalkeeper. Montreal weren't great last season, if I'm being honest. I think they fired their coach. They have a new coach in. But he went through an incredible spell as well. If we have a look further down here, have a look at this little stretch of games. So from game week 385 maybe down to 367 where they played Kansas City. It's just full of dark green scores. Like, Montreal went on a really good run of games, 22 AA, 33 AA, 20 AA, 24 AA, 30 AA. You could argue that these scores are probably the best we've seen so far. Start of the season was diabolical, as you can see. Won 1 game out of 7. Still some decent scores though, 23 AA in that game where they conceded 2. So, you know, he is probably, or was last season, the most capable of scoring really high AA. But one thing I found in the MLS is, you know, whatever happened last season doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen this season. So the $1 million question is he going to get these dark green scores again? I mean, probably not. He might get a couple, but I don't think it's going to look as this consistent, you know, over like a 15-game span, to be honest, because I think that was a bit of a freak situation, to be honest, as far as MLS goalkeepers go. You know, it might happen again. You know, I'm here to be proven wrong. But the MLS is a weird league, like I said. You don't find that many clean sheets. And, you know, young goalkeepers, new players, new managers, specifically, you know, at Montreal. You know, I'm not saying he won't ever score that well again. You know, it's just quite hard to see who's going to really struggle, who's going to just be mediocre. And there's still business to be had. You know, teams are still strengthening squads. Players are still leaving. So it's still all up in the air in that sense. But for me, I think we're going to be going into this season with 4 starting goalkeepers. And yeah, if I had to rank them, it'd be Celentano. I would say Schulte in second, Sirois in third, and then Brady probably in fourth. If we're talking, you know, how good are they going to score? Not, you know, who is the best prospect in that sense. Going over to defender then, lads. We're going to toggle this to minimum games played of 3. And we're going to toggle this to L15 as well. So we're going to rank from highest L15 to lowest. And to be honest, the defender category for under 23s in the MLS doesn't look that great for next season. Tavon Gray went on a really good run of games for New York City towards the end of the season. Lots of green scores, not many dark greens, but, you know, some respectable scores in there. Before that, it was very, very bleak, where New York just weren't very good. It took them a while to sort of get going, and even when they did, you know, he's still scoring well in some of these games where they're losing those games, you know, which is not a bad sign. If your defenders are scoring well in games where your team is losing, then you know if things are going to turn around, i.e. they start getting clean sheets, then that's like a plus 14 AA score on a lot of these scores. So he's definitely one to look out for. He's a decent player, very athletic, good tackler. I think the best player though by a mile for me, and I am quite surprised he hasn't yet moved to Europe, is John Tolkin. Has taken set pieces in the past for New York Red Bulls, but they do have Emil Forsberg now, so I'm not sure if Tolkin will get, you know, a chunk of them. But as you can see, some incredible scores, loads of assists, can score goals as well, can get really good AA scores, and yeah, for me, by far the best defender, I would say, in the MLS, if we're talking under 23 players. Comes in at £13 for a limited, not terrible. £143 3-day average for the rare. And yeah, I mean, looking down this list, lads, it's just not looking great, I'll be honest. Like, Nathan Harriel's a good player. I think he's one that we should definitely mention. Plays for Philly, who are a good team historically. Didn't have the best of seasons last year, but as you can see, 40 AA, 30 AA with a goal. Can get really, really dark green scores. And even in losses, 30 AA away to Inter Miami in a 4-1 loss, which is ridiculous, really, if you've conceded 4 goals. But under 23 until 2025, he's only £2.54, which I think is quite crazy, to be fair. Just under £50 for the rare card. And then going down the list, we've got George Campbell, who I am a bit of a fan of. He plays for Montreal. And, you know, you could get a bit of a defensive and goalkeeper stack with Sirois and Campbell. I don't think he's nailed on to start this season. It's going to be interesting to see what the new coach thinks of him. But some decent scores, can score pretty well on his day. Is liable to give away a penalty. Loves a yellow card as well. But like I said, you know, he's not the best. I mean, what's his price? £1.21. Not terrible for a limited. £14 for the rare. Decent player. Like, I do rate him. He was at Atlanta United before that. We've got Jacob Meyer, who's a decent player. He's under 23 though until this summer. So after July, his under 23 eligibility will be up. Can score relatively well, like not incredible. Caleb Wiley's a very talented player, but his defender card kind of kills him a little bit with the amount of goals Atlanta were conceding last year. And if he plays on the wing, he's just losing the ball too much basically for the Matrix to kind of reward him. But you know, able to get assists, he's very good. I think I watched his debut game actually in the stadium at Atlanta United against Kansas City a few years back. But yeah, very talented player. Corbo's a decent player. For Montreal as well. Again, 24 though, so his eligibility will be running up, you know, in July. Was able to go on a really nice run of games here. Lots of green scores. But other than that, lads, I mean, it's just quite bleak. Like, I don't like the look of the under 23 defender category on Sorare this year. There's just not that many cards that I can get behind. Like I said, I think John Tolkien's, massive sort of favourite for me if he stays. Like, he is the best under-23 defender by a mile. I think the addition of Forsberg into that team will only make him better, even though he might not get set pieces. I think, Forsberg in that team will definitely take New York to sort of the next level. You've got Tavon Gray, who's decent. Harry, like I said, is pretty decent. Outside of that, it doesn't look great, lads. I'll be honest. It doesn't look great at all. So we're going to move on to midfielders, and we're going to sort by L15. So Ricky Puig comes in at the top. He is 24, so his eligibility will be up this summer as well. But if I'm being honest, him and Almada are probably the best two midfielders on the game if we're talking under 23s. Look at these scores, lads. Goals in most games. Some really good AA. 44 AA, 24 AA, 30, 31, 29, 25. Capable of decisive, take set pieces. Ex-Barcelona academy player, first team player actually. Kind of what you expect. £17 for the limited, doesn't seem terrible. Incredible player for that league, far too good for it. I don't think he's going to move, to be honest. It doesn't seem like he wants to leave LA Galaxy anytime soon. But on the contrary to that, Almada is one that is rumoured to move this winter from Atlanta United. I mean, he's the best talent for me. He's a little bit younger than Puig at 22, so he's got under 23 eligibility until 2025. Just an incredible player. Just look at these scores, lads. He's absolutely insane. But there is heavy rumours on him leaving. I think he is going to leave personally. There was rumours of Atletico Madrid, but they ended up getting Arthur Veerman in. Fiorentina has been rumoured as well. So it feels like he is going to move. So I'm not going to talk about him too much because I don't really think he will stay. We've got Aidan Morris, who can score incredibly well. Some really good AA scores from him. Absolute monster when it comes to duels won, tackles, interceptions. Look at that. 5 tackles won, 7 duels won, 1 interception. And can score goals as well, get assists. As far as Americans go, playing in the MLS, midfielders, under 23, he ticks all the boxes for me. £18, under 23 until 2026. There is always that risk, though, with American players that play well in the MLS is they want to go abroad. They want to go and play in Europe. And I don't think that would be much different for an Aidan Morris. They see the likes of Weston McKennie's and Brendan Aronson's going abroad and kind of doing their thing. I'd be shocked if Aidan Morris doesn't move at some point. I'm not sure if that's going to be, this season. It doesn't look like I've not seen many rumours of him leaving. So, keep tabs on that. He is an incredible player for that league, and I do think he'll score incredibly well next season in a good Columbus Crew team. We've got Santi Rodriguez. I'm a massive fan of Santi. He is under 23, though, until July. After that, he is not going to be eligible, but some really good scores. Like I mentioned, New York City weren't great last season. They got better towards the end, and as you can see, Santi's scores definitely benefited from that. He went through a bit of a tough spell around here where there was just not many decisives at all. And yeah, obviously his scores suffered. But towards the end of the season, they got a bit better. And I do think he'll do well in the MLS. I think he's a really good player. Takes set pieces, very tricky. Makes things happen, very creative player. And yeah, for £8, £7.65, I don't think it's terrible. Obviously, the under 23 eligibility up until just July kind of, puts people off maybe a little bit, where you could get an Aidan Morris, double the price, but way more eligibility. But that's not to say he's going to, play his whole sort of under 23 eligibility in the MLS. So always take that into account. We've got Alvaro Barrial, who has hinted that he wants to leave Cincinnati this winter, which would be disappointing. I do own his rare card, and he was incredible last season and the season before for Cincinnati, where they had a lot of success. And yeah, again, I'm not really going to talk too much about him because I just think he's going to leave, and it just doesn't really make too much sense. Now, Jack McGlynn's a really interesting one. Really talented American from Philadelphia. Has taken set pieces for them. Really nice left foot, and has scored relatively well. No score above 85 is obviously a bit of a concern. Can score very well on his day. Can get assists. Like I said, really nice left foot. Cemented himself into this team, into a good Philly team, at 20 years old, which is very encouraging. For under £5 for a limited doesn't seem terrible to me. And he's under 23 until 2028. Below that, we've got Cesar Araujo, who's at Orlando City. Can score very well on his day. He's a CDM, a little bit more defensive than, the likes of Ricky Puig, Almada, etc. But can score, very well on his day. 31 AAs, 23 AAs, 28 AAs. It feels like, if he doesn't get a decisive, the issue is going with a player like this is, you are up against the Ricky Puigs, you are up against the Santiago Rodriguez's, you are playing up higher up the field, and you know, the chances of them getting decisives are just a little bit higher than, you know, maybe a CDM would. I know he went through a really good spell here, but for the most part, like, you're not really expecting your CDMs to get that many decisives. He's there to break up play, pass it to players who, you know, are a little bit more creative, like your Facundo Torres is, which we will move on to. But a decent card for £4. It doesn't seem terrible. Santiago Moreno's an interesting one. He's just signed a contract extension at Portland Timbers. I think he's a good player. The issue is, because he plays on the wing for the majority of his time at the Timbers, and he has a midfielder card, he does lose the ball a lot, and it does sort of affect his scores quite drastically. But somebody that can score goals, he can get assists, he can score decently well if we're talking AA. Nothing crazy, like 27 AA there is actually really good. Outside of that, we haven't really seen anything above that, to be honest, into the 30s, which is, you know, I'm not saying you need that, but it is obviously quite nice. And yeah, went through a bit of a dry patch here where Timbers weren't great, he weren't great either, but towards the end of the season got a bit better. And he's under 23 until the summer though, keep that in mind. £2.54 though, doesn't seem... Another name we need to mention is Diego Luna of Real Salt Lake. An absolute baller this kid is. Under 23 until 2028, he's £10.81 right now. He's somebody that I think is absolutely incredible, very, very young still. Made his way into this Real Salt Lake side and was being very, very decisive towards the end of the season. Scoring goals, 4 goals in 5 games towards the playoffs. 20 AA, 20 AA, 12 AA, 20 AA down here against Vancouver. 41 AA against Portland Timbers, which is mental. Really, really interesting player. Very, very small, low center of gravity. Can thread passes through, can score goals. Very, very well balanced. He's such a good talent. Again, somebody that I think is probably too good for this league, if we're being honest. I know he's not done too much yet, and you've probably not heard of him, but next season I think he'll have his sort of breakout season, and he is, yeah, an incredible player. Next to that, we've got Facundo Torres, who I believe has just signed a contract extension at Orlando, which I'm shocked at, to be honest. His under-23 eligibility is up this summer as well, but again, basically the main player at Orlando. Takes set pieces, incredible scores. He's been linked with like Arsenal in the past. Has played for Uruguay as well. Just a really good player. Very, very tricky winger. Can come inside on his left foot really, really well. Scores goals, like I said, takes set pieces. And somebody who's basically the main man out to Orlando, which, you know, for £7 for the limited doesn't seem like a terrible decision. Although his under-23 eligibility is obviously up in the summer. A couple of other names I want to mention that I like, but I won't go into too much depth with, is Brian Gutierrez. Very, very good player. Daniel Edelman, very good player for New York Red Bulls, only 20 years old. We've got Frankie Amaya, who I do like, I'm a big fan of. I do own his card, so I'm a little bit biased. Like I mentioned with the Tolkien situation, though, I think Amaya used to share set pieces with Tolkien, and I think Forsberg is probably going to shit all over that, basically. So I'm not sure how good Amaya is going to be as far as scoring goes. Saliba's a very talented player. Nathan Saliba for Montreal, definitely keep an eye on him. I know his scores doesn't really seem to reflect that, but a really, really good player. Has had links, you know, previously to Europe and stuff. He's still only 19 years old. Very, very good player. We've got Paxton Pomykal, who's a decent player. 73p for him, which is just feels mental. Pedro Vite is a really interesting player for Vancouver. I actually really like the look of him. James Sands, very solid player for New York City. We've got Andreas Pereira, who's just signed for New York City from Philly. Very good player on his day. I'm not sure how he's going to fit into this New York side, but when he plays, he's good. Like, he's a very talented lad, under 23 until 2025. Kramashi, unfortunately, is out for the next couple of months, but he looks really, really good for Inter Miami. We've got Noel Buck, who's only 18 years old. He's one of the highest rated players as far as under 23 talents. You know, just in real life, he hasn't really scored that well yet. You know, on the Matrix, on Sorare, but a very, very talented player. After that, doesn't really look too good. I like this Azeel Jackson, actually. He plays for St. Louis FC, has had links to Europe as well in the past, under 23 until 26. Went on a nice little run of games down here where he had a few decisives in a row. Bryce Duke's decent, plays for Montreal. He should have a decent role next season. Does like to take set pieces. Very talented player. Quinn Sullivan's a very good player as well for Philadelphia Union. Keep an eye on him next season. And then after that, we've got Obed Vargas, who sort of broke out last season. I think he's very, very good. Not really too much else to look at, lads. So that's the midfielders done. Moving on to forwards then. We're going to toggle this back. Like I mentioned with the defender category, there isn't too much depth there compared to maybe the midfielders. And as forwards go for the MLS under 23s, it doesn't look that great either, lads, if I'm being honest. We've got Jesus Ferreira at the top of our list, which for me next season, if I'm looking at this sort of top 12 right here, He's by far the best under-23 forward in the MLS. He's recently been linked with a move to Spartak Moscow, which I thought was a bit interesting. I think they bidded roughly like 13 million for him, but I think the MLS sort of blocked the move, even though Ferreira wanted to go, which isn't really a great sign. I'm a Ferreira holder. I'm a big Ferreira fan. He's sort of the main man at Dallas. As a very good under-23, MLS American player, they all want to move to Europe realistically for the most part. But I thought Jesus was quite happy at Dallas. But it does seem that he is interested in, moves abroad, as shown in that Spartak Moscow situation. So keep an eye on that one. I'm an owner of him, so I'm in that boat as well. So, I wouldn't be telling you guys definitely go out and buy a Jesus Ferreira. I would sort of wait until sort of the transfer window maybe is shut and he is still there. But for me, yeah, by far the best sort of player as far as, credentials go, as far as taking set pieces, and as far as scores. Like, look at these scores. We've got hundreds, 90s, 80s, lots of dark green scores, capable of really good AA for a forward, which is very, very rare. And that's mainly down to his creative side, the set pieces he takes, the chances he creates. So he's by far probably the best forward, I would say. Velasco's done his ACL, so he's somebody that we shouldn't really talk about right now, I don't think. Carranza's a very good goal scorer. Scored a lot of goals last season for Philly, capable of really high peaks as well. He's up there as well, definitely, don't get me wrong. Under 23 though until 2024, so just until this summer, where I think Ferreira has until 25, which his birthday falls quite nicely. Another Dallas player though who's really, really interesting, came on the scene last season, is Bernard Kamungo, under 23 until 2026. And as you can see, scored incredibly well whilst he played. Basically every game he played, he did something. He either got a goal, won a penalty, created an assist. He was just very, very decisive. In some games, a lot better than Ferreira as far as, if you're watching the games, he was just a lot more impactful. But we didn't see a full season of him, and I think we are going to see that next season. So he's one definitely to keep an eye on. We've got Opoku, who I am actually a fan of. I do own his rare card. He moved from LAFC to Montreal last season, and it didn't really go too well for him at the start, but he did score a few goals and, scored relatively well. 17 AAs, 14 AAs, is capable of decent scores. He's not somebody that's, going to be taking set pieces, but he is, a decent talent. And again, I think he probably has aspirations of moving to Europe at some point. So if he can get a really good start to the season or first half of the season down at Montreal, then, potentially halfway through the season, there could be a move for him there. We've got Bongo, who was actually really, really good last year. Came out of nowhere, I feel like, for Minnesota and scored incredibly well at times. Kind of went off the boil towards the end of the season. He is right now playing in the African Cup of Nations for South Africa, which is incredible. Played incredibly well last season, out of nowhere. In a Minnesota team that has Emmanuel Reynoso in, he was always going to get chances. And yeah, look at this run of games here. He scored like 10 goals in seven or so games, which is mental. 30 AA, 19 AA, 24 AA, 29 AA. And I think that's without set pieces as well. So he's a really good one as well. Don't get me wrong. I think he's up there with Jesus. Duncan Maguire is rumoured to leave. I've seen Blackburn rumours. I've seen, what else have I seen? Stoke maybe in the Championship. So yeah, I'm going to kind of disregard him, but he was pretty good last season for Orlando. Kerwin Vargas is an interesting one. Really talented winger from Charlotte FC, who I think could be really good next season. He did really well towards the end of the season in the playoffs. Before that, didn't really get many games, coming off the bench quite often. But somebody who I think, if he were to nail down a starting spot, as you can see, is capable of scoring really, really well. And somebody you should definitely keep an eye on. We've got Talles Magno, who's always linked with moves abroad because he's part of the City group and whatever. Talented player, plays with Santiago Rodriguez. Maybe forward midfielder stack there. We've got Bakra, who also plays for New York. He's decent. We've got Jovic, who plays for LA Galaxy. He's decent. Come off the bench quite often last season. Got goals, but nothing too much to shout about there. Schaffelberg's a decent player. Julian Fernandez, who was signed from the Argentinian league to New York City, was pretty good towards the end of the season when he came in, but mostly bench appearances. If he can nail down a starting spot, very, very athletic, can score goals, and has done it in the Argentinian league, which is not an easy league to sort of do it in. But yeah, excited to see how he sort of gets on next season. Marshall Ruti's a decent player, but I think he might play right back for Toronto. Ramiro Henrique, decent player for Orlando. Haven't really seen too much of him though in an Orlando shirt. Yeah, lads, it's just not looking great outside of that. Like I said, the forwards, goalkeepers, and defender categories are looking quite thin, I would say, next season. And yeah, there's always going to be new players that pop up. There's always going to be transfers in that we're unaware of as we're filming this video. But we are going to get into the best 5 that we could possibly build. We're going to do it over on the concept builder on Sorare data. I'm going to throw myself down here so you can see, you know, the price of things and how much it's going to cost us, basically. So I'm going to go into league. We're going to go MLS. We're going to go age, under 23 eligible. And I'm going to go in and pick my favorite or my best 5 that I think you could potentially buy if money wasn't sort of an object next season. So I think you've got to get Ricky Puig in there. I think Puig has to be our midfielder just because I don't think Almada stays. And if he doesn't stay, for me, Puig is the next best midfielder. As far as forwards go, I think I'm going to have to be biased and say Jesus. I think we're going to have to definitely throw Jesus in there. As far as defenders go, like I said, it's not looking too great right now, is it? But if we assume the Tolkien stays, I'm going to have to say Tolkien. Because right now he hasn't left, and I know that's the same as Almada, but the links with Almada are just way stronger, I would say. And then if we look at goalkeepers, you know, like I mentioned at the start, I think it has to be Celentano. It's either Celentano or Schulte for me, but I'm going to back Celentano personally. We're going to throw him in. And then as far as our extra player goes, I'm definitely not going to pick a defender, so we can disregard defenders here. We're going to go midfielders or forwards. So it's basically out of Aidan Morris, I would say. I'd say Santi's definitely up there. We've got Comungo, who's definitely, you could go 2 forwards, 2 Dallas forwards in Jesus and Comungo. I think that could definitely work. Diego Luna's definitely in with a shout. Facundo Torres. Some decent players here. There's definitely some decent cards that we could fit into that extra position. It gets a bit dodgy, you know, the lower we go as far as talents go. So I am going to probably stick to the sort of upper side of this list. And it's hard not to go with Aidan Morris, isn't it? L15 of 60, L40 of 60, which is ridiculous, really. I know Almada has a better L40, but like we said, we're going to kind of disregard Almada. I really do think he is going to leave. Now, this is probably the best on paper under 23 MLS lineup that you could build. It would cost you £97 if you did it right now to get all 5 players in. None of them play for the same team in that sense, so you know there's no stacks to kind of be had. But in under 23, you don't really need to be stacking cards, I don't think. You know, as far as like goalkeepers, defenders, forwards, and midfielders, you can. There's definitely synergy in it. Like I said, the Comungo and Ferreira, if they have a really good matchup, then that could be an interesting double forward play. But in under 23, specifically in the summer, you just need the best scorers. You don't really need necessarily the best synergy and the best sort of combinations of cards that play for the same teams. I don't think it's necessary. It could be an all-star rare, in America rare, etc., but I don't think it's needed in under 23. And this is probably, yeah, for me, the best under 23 MLS lineup money can buy right now. Let me know if you agree with it, lads. Let me know if you would change anything. But I hope this video has helped you understand the under 23 landscape for the MLS a little bit better. If it did, please do give it a like and just give me a comment down below. Let me know if you enjoyed the video and if you have any further questions for the under 23s in the MLS. I hope you enjoyed the video, lads. Leave a like if you did,